Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Ranjiku, Sui-Fong and FemKurama? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. The day after that kiss was a strange one to Naruto. He felt as though he were walking on air, which he would accidentally do sometimes. He couldn't wait for the woman to return, for him to go and be with her. It was such a pleasant thought to be with a woman so beautiful, so kind as she was, to have the patience to train him and help him reach his goal. He knew that he was a boisterous and loud, not to mention annoying at times, young lad. But yet despite this and the age he was still held him at an almost equal level of interest. He couldn't say he loved her, and he knew she couldn't say such either, but it was a start. He was so alleviated even from the current situation of protecting Tsunami that oftentimes his mind would wander more often than it usually would. He felt his head go straight to a plan, a date for them to hang out sometime. Naruto got so far into the planning that he began mumbling what he was going to do to set it up. So content and joyful was he that Naruto felt that nothing could go wrong. But he was soon reminded of Zabuza's threat when he was on watch duty over Tsunami. He witnessed a man nearly quit the job on the bridge out of pure fear that Zabuza or Gato's men would come and crush them all. The man spoke with terror as he said that the man Gato would even go as far as killing the innocent villagers after they were done with that. Naruto sobered up after the fear-stricken man's words sunk in, realizing now more than ever that it was not the time to be dwelling over Ranjiku. He and her would have a chance that he knew, but only after this mission was over. If he let his mind slip and drag on what could be, he would screw up on the mission, getting him, yes, not only him but also his teammates killed, and what could be would never be. The whiskered blonde swore then and there that he would protect not just Tsunami and his workers or the people of Wave. He did not only swear to protect his teammates and Ranjiku if it did come down to it. He swore to protect every last person he saw as a friend till the last breath he gave. After that, Naruto came up to the man who wished to quit and told him not to worry. The man tried to protest and Naruto got an idea. He told the man, can Gato or his men stand on air? Gathering Reishi beneath his feet, Naruto began to climb atop the very air. Can he do that? He asked again. The man amazed said no. Naruto spoke again, saying, are they trained ninja? Or are they thugs? And isn't Zabuza healing? With the potential to only have a single other ninja helping him. Isn't that true, that he cannot stand against us? Even if you have doubts. Naruto's rising words was heard, not by that single man, but by the whole of the workers as he stepped down from his pedestal in the sky. When he stepped down, they crowded him, shouting up encouraging words to him and amongst themselves. Sakura came by and ended Naruto's shift, and he told them before he left that she was capable in defending them. To Tsuna's great surprise and overwhelming joy, work production increased double-fold after that. A few days after this, Naruto could be seen training all alone, having already gotten used to the tree climbing exercise. He did so in the thought that because he had greater control of his chakra, it would help him fight in the case Zabuza returned or if any threat came to bear its head. Now, if he hadn't had his training with Ranjiku to control the Ryuko the first week they met, he was sure that he'd be passed out and on the forest floor by now. But he wasn't. In fact, he was currently just working up a sweat, swinging his Zanpakuto, increasing his dexterity with the weapon. The grass below him was swept up in the wake of his blade, curling beneath the weight of the wind his sword carried. Naruto took a step on the air and spun before a tree, lashing his Zanpakuto out as he did so. It was a thick tree, at least 4 feet at the base, but as sure as the rain comes, his blade passed right through it. It began to fall. Right on top of Naruto. All of its weight. The whiskered blonde twisted his sword to the earth below and swung up. A great crack came as he sliced through its trunk, splitting it in two even as it passed harmlessly at his sides. Even after that feat, Naruto still let out a curse. Damn it all. He shouted to the heavens, sinking his sword into one of the halves of the tree he split. Naruto sat down across from it on the other half, glaring deeply into his Zanpakuto. He gave a huff of contempt and I kid you not gave the one-finger salute to his sword. Why? Naruto suddenly exploded, scattering what birds were left in the area, pointing accusingly at his Zanpakuto. Why can't I use that technique again like I did against Zabuza? He bellowed to his sword once more, lowering his hand. Walter? Why the beepery? Hello? Naruto nearly leapt from his skin at the voice, for one part not hearing them come behind him, and the second part because they probably just heard him shouting at probably to them an inanimate object. Naruto turned on his tree trunk seat. There stood, in a pink kimono attire, a young lass, dark beautiful eyes framed by locks of brown hair. She was about the same figure as Sakura, petite and all if a bit more shapely. As he was looking her up and down, the boy realized he was staring, especially when she began to squint her eyes at him expectantly, a brow raised to her temple, as if in expectation. He shook himself free from his own pondering and greeted her, deciding to be a bit gentlemanly. Sorry to stare. He apologized first, then raising his hand, saying, "My name's Naruto Uzumaki." The young girl looked at his hand with scrutiny, as if he were leveling a venomous snake at her. "Haku?" She took his hand and shook lightly, smiling a moment later. When their hands fell, his eyes fell to the basket she carried. The first thought that came to mind was to ask what it was for, but instead settled for why she was outie so deep in the boondocks. Oh, well, there's someone in my family who's sick, so I decided to get some fresh herbs to help get them better." "So, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice light like a breeze when mentioning the family member. Naruto stopped himself, realizing that if he were to go into great grand tale concerning him trying to force some great slicing energy out of a sword taller than him, well, it would probably scare her away. So, without missing a beat, answered with, "I'm training." Haku nodded, seeming to find his words not as strange as he thought she would find them. As she did so, Naruto realized he was being rude by sitting down and not offering to help her find herbs, and yet she was patient enough to talk to a complete stranger. So, he stood off the fallen half of tree and asked if she wanted his help. Yet, as he did so, she flinched. Had his sudden movement frightened her? If so, he asked if she was okay. Yeah, it's just, I didn't realize you'd be taller than me," Haku told, smiling a bit with nervousness in her tone. Naruto was going to retort, tell her he was not short, but stopped himself. He straightened up and could actually clearly see right straight across the top of her head, just a few inches taller than her. Strange, he shouldn't be that tall yet. He was about even with Sakura, if only a hair shorter. But by the looks of it, he was about as tall as Sasuke now, if not a slight taller. How could that be? Was it his developing Ryuko in him? Would he continue to grow taller? Would it even stop? Oh, he could see himself, 100 feet tall raging monster bashing through buildings. Oh no, oh no. How was he gonna get into his apartment now? Hell with the apartment, how was he gonna be a stealthy ninja when he could be seen miles away? Naruto felt himself begin to breath heavily. Palm. Breath. Ian. Ood. Okay. He was Fian. He was not going to become a giant. His body must be only maturing fast because the Ryuko was increasing in his body, it only maturing because it was then easier to deal with a lot of Ryuko. It had to be that. It was the only thing that made sense. Shortly after, Naruto began picking herbs with Haku, enjoying the break from his training and getting to spend time with someone that wasn't some silent sword who was being a very nasty word at the moment. During the time he helped the lass, she struck up a conversation with him. They talked between one another in a pleasant manner, both finding little that either could hold against one another. Haku was an agreeable person, Naruto soon found out. But, in one of their bouts of silence, when neither could find something to say to the other in that moment with naught but the sound of crunching plants as they were picked, she suddenly asked him a peculiar question. "So why is it you train so hard, Naruto-san?" "Oh, well, I want to protect those I care for, of course," the Jinchuriki told with a bright smile across his face. "What drives you to protect them? What would you do to keep them alive?" Her voice became sharp shards of ice then, digging into his ears. His smile faded. Naruto's gaze fell as he thought on her words, deeply. Why did he want to protect them? What reason did he want to? And, even if he could somehow answer that, then to what extent would he go to do that? He made that vow on the bridge, and that he would fight to his last breath, but he didn't really know why besides the fact that he cared about them. Haku stood, drawing his attention as she grasped the basket's handle. Her back was turned to him as she made a few strides away from the boy, but then, she stopped. Her head turned a slight, just enough that he could see her lips utter something that'd change him from now and forever. Those words were this. "If those you protect are precious to you," her tone was soft, like velvet, "then those precious people, you must be willing to fight for them through pain and the blows that come. Naruto-san, you must be willing to give up everything, you must be willing to die for their sake, because they are the most important thing in your life." Then, Haku was gone before his very eyes, a swirl of wind and leaves was the only indication that she truly was there just moments before. The next day, in the morning, Naruto sat at the table, eating breakfast, his teammates gone to the finishing of the bridge. He was left to chat with Tsunami and her son, Inari. The boy was not a very happy one, Naruto soon learned, having heard him cry in the night over his lost father. Gato had slain the man who opposed him and his reign of oppression, thus leaving a young boy to fend for himself. It doesn't matter. The boy suddenly spoke, venom at the edge of his lips. "Inari." "No, Mom," he shouted, pointing at Naruto as the blonde continued to eat. "It's all their fault. Because of them, Gato will kill everyone. It's all their fault." The boy screamed, nearly leaping up from his sitting position. Inari looked like he was going to strangle Naruto, but both the blonde and Tsunami saw the tears that were beginning to well up in the boy's eyes. Naruto stood, his hair shadowing his blue eyes, having not worn his headband. Then, he suddenly leapt forward at the two, grabbing them in his long arms, using Shunpo just as a katana swept overhead. The whiskered blonde appeared outside, setting the two down with care. "What the hell?" Inari screamed at Naruto. Naruto said nothing, he merely stood up straight, eyes showing beneath the shaggy locks of golden hair. When he finally did speak, his voice was rough, calloused, yet held a calm to it that shook the boy from his feet. "Two men just broke into your home trying to kill you, and I save you." He turned as two men indeed leapt out of the house, swords in hand. One was shorter but skinny, a beefy calmness to him. The other was taller by a few heads, very muscular. "You think that me and my comrades are pushovers, Inari? You think all hope is lost? Well, I tell you what. If I cannot block them with just my hand, then you're right," Naruto told as the two men rushed him, katanas raised against him. "But if they don't even cause a nick, you have to stand up and be strong. How's that?" The whiskered blonde set his gaze back on the small child, lifting his hand to the two mercenary thugs. Inari just looked on in a slight daze, watching as those swords were swung right at that very hand. "Watch out." The boy screamed at the very last instant, concern exploding from the surface of his usually uncaring visage. Shing. The swords clattered together against the Jinchuriki's palm, his fingers clasping around them to keep the two from pulling away. He turned his head to the men, a glare in his eyes. "What do you say, Inari? Want to change the outcome this time?" Snap. With a sharp twist of his wrist, Naruto shattered the blades with unconcerned ease, throwing the remains in his hands into the two killers. They fell, the remnants of their katanas protruding from their skulls. Naruto stepped over them and headed into the house, coming back out with his Zanpakuto in hand. He strode past the bodies and was about to leave Inari and Tsunami when the boy shouted out to him, his voice pleading. "Wait, what do you want me to do?" Naruto's gaze fell back on him, this time, it was not a hard glare, but instead, it was a reassuring one. "Bet everyone, Gato is going to attack the bridge. Inspire them, Inari, just as your father had. Tsunami, when this is all over, I want you to make a big bowl of ramen, we are going to celebrate your village's freedom tonight." With his parting words, Naruto flash-stepped to the bridge. A few minutes before, Team 7 minus Naruto stood atop the bridge. Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi had been watching over the workers and Tazuna as they completed the bridge. Sasuke knew, as did the others, that if it were a time to strike them and the bridge down, it was now. His thinking was confirmed when, in the middle of the day, mist began to roll out from the forest on the other completed side of the bridge. The workers were ordered to fall back into the village even as that fog began to rise and thicken all around them. Once the workers were gone, all three the healed Kakashi included drew their kunai, standing at the ready in the middle of the bridge. Then, they heard the slow methodical sound of clap, 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 clap. They flinched beneath the sound of some slow clapping sound, the sound bouncing from the fog in an echo of distant distraught, a looming madness hidden beneath the folds of mist that shrouded the sea and bridge. The clapping stopped, and the silence that followed was naught but worse than sound itself. The mist parted a moment later, just enough that they could see a short, stocky man in rounded glasses peer at them with dark humor. He lifted a stubby-fingered hand to his button-stripped shirt, adjusting it in a gentlemanly manner. He pocketed his hand in his slacks and tapped a cane near his brown shoes. He opened his mouth and greeted them with an arrogant snarl of words. "Hello. My name is Gato, the proprietor of that there village of Wave." The short man lifted his cane, gesturing past them towards the village. "Now I understand that you folk have been trying to disrupt my business here. But, I am a gentleman, as well as a businessman. So, I forgive you, so long as you do me one favor." He held up his cane with one stubby digit to the sky. "You must destroy this bridge and kill the workers so that they may never make it again." Sasuke felt disgusted by this man, more so after that. What he was asking was insanity, pure unadulterated folly. But, he was an Uchiha, and so he kept those feeling wrapped beneath him and instead yelled back. "Not gonna happen." Leaping his head to the side, a flash of anger slipping into his face, Gato turned on his heel. "Fine with me. I'll see ya in hell, you ugly bastards. Have it, boys." As he shouted back at the three, and those last cruel words pressed into them, a great shout from what seemed like hundreds of men came thundering out all around them. They watched as Gato was enveloped back into the mist, and as he did so, they had to leap back when a moment later a large axe was thrown right where they stood before. The great rush of feet made the bridge shudder as men began to pour out from the fog. Sasuke waited for them to get within range, then threw out a hail of kunai and shuriken at the hundreds of thugs. With the added help of Kakashi and Sakura throwing their own, quite a few lines were already knocked down. When their throwing weapons were nearly out, they resorted to taijutsu knowing regular ninjutsu would destroy the bridge. Sasuke was about to leap out with his teammate and Kakashi when something swept him and Sakura up, rocketing them back and far away from their sensei. They landed on the hard bridge, a grit to their teeth as they stood moments later. All around them, to what it looked like, were glass no ice mirrors, all in a dome shape. In every one of them appeared a young woman in a kimono, a mist hunter nin symbol upon the mask she wore. In a calm tone, soft like Loden snow, she spoke. All who enter here shall perish, for this is my domain. Please, die swiftly. In the weeks to come, Sasuke hated the sight of senbon needles. Out on the bridge, Kakashi was bashing skulls, glancing back at the dome of ice in concern for his students. He was having an easy time defeating the thugs, them just being common fools trying to be tough and big, the only adversity that they wielded weapons, and that they were numerous. Though, with his students in that dome, and Naruto being nowhere in sight, it would be tough to finish this, especially if Zabuza was healed and no doubt controlling the mist. Kakashi was about to lift his headband and get this over with faster when a hand kept his still. Naruto. His single eye widened upon seeing the boy. His head bowed a moment later when an unseen force distributed itself, keeping the thugs on their knees when they got too close. Hey Kakashi-sensei, don't be so hasty. Can't you feel him in there? Zabuza. He's waiting. Keep that thing covered until it gets too hard to fight these thugs, and if I fail, you can finish off Zabuza. Naruto quickly said, bursting off into the air, rushing past the thugs below to the end of the bridge. As the pressure began to dissipate, the scarecrow-made man had a single pondering. When did he get taller? Kakashi thought as he slugged another thug right between the eyes. Back in the dome, Sasuke and Sakura were dodging the many senbon thrown at them, trying to stay far away from the deadly needles. Sasuke had tried to throw a kunai at the mirrors to shatter them, but soon found that same kunai come rushing back at him. Damn. He thought, dodging yet another slew of needles. He rolled around and threw a punch at one of the ice mirrors, only to receive 3 senbon in the arm. Sasuke screamed, his arm falling limp. Sakura yelled if he was going to be okay, her voice cut off as she tried to evade some needles too. Yeah. He told, pulling out the senbon in his arm. He was about to throw them to the ground when an idea came to his mind. Sakura. He called, jumping over more projectiles. He came to her side and whispered quickly. Throw everything at the mirrors, not just one mirror, all of them. Throw smoke bombs and regular ones, as well as kunai and shuriken. She nodded. He did too. Naruto was about to reach the end of the bridge when he heard an explosion, large and booming it was, enough to sway the fog around him. It put a smile on his face. I knew they'd be fine. Regrettably, you won't be. His smile faded as his head snapped down to the ground, the mist dispersing enough that he could see Zabuza, completely healed. The man held his blade on his shoulder, resting it there as he addressed Naruto once more. You know, you're a smart one. Putting enough trust in your team so that you could fight me without wasting energy beforehand. Isn't that what you were thinking? His voice then was almost sickeningly pleasant, but then it darkened into one that Naruto expected of the man. I say FemKurama. They, like all ninja, are tools of war. And my ambition is what drives me as a tool. Do not expect me to go easy on you Naruto, Haku told me everything about how you move in battle. Naruto's fears of Haku were confirmed then, as she being a ninja, and coupled with her saying she was helping a sick person, that just sealed it. He felt a little betrayal, having had a pleasant conversation and a deep one with the lass. But he slew those thoughts, knowing that he was not going to come close to winning if he was distracted. The blonde Jinchuriki whipped his blade around, gritting his teeth as he gathered Reishi around him, that crimson aura engulfing him entirely. He watched Zabuza bring his sword back and leap into the air, swinging his sword at Naruto. The blonde deflected the blow and spun around, digging his own blade into Zabuza's. The force was too much and it brought the man back down to earth. Naruto followed after, rushing down like a comet. They met again, his sword over Zabuza's. Who do you think you are? Zabuza bellowed, pushing Naruto off and Sparta kicking him right in the chest. Naruto tumbled back a few feet but skid to a stop, raising his blade to point right at Zabuza. He came back sprinting, swinging against the devil of the mist. What do you mean? Naruto shouted back. The man blocked it in a shower of sparks, easily slicing his sword up and getting Naruto open for a spin kick. It landed right into the lad's ribs, forcing him to stumble. Get it through your head boy. Zabuza punched Naruto in the back of his head, sending him toppling over his feet to the ground. Naruto tried to stand but screamed in pain as his hand was stomped on by the nin, his foot grinding Naruto's hand into the rough ground. AHH. That's right boy, scream. This is pain. This is the reality of the world. We are tools to be used. Or discarded. The man's foot lifted and slammed into the boy's gut, a sickening snap, eliciting a cry from the downed boy. But Zabuza didn't stop, he kept going, hitting harder than before, the sharp crunch of bone drowning out the dying voice of the boy's screams. Eventually, Zabuza stopped, a grimace and glare coming down on the boy. You are going to die, and I am going to kill your so-called sensei and friends. There will be nothing you can do about that. You are just a broken tool, no more and no less. Zabuza's thick and dark words hung there even after he strolled away as if nothing had happened. Naruto felt nothing now, the numbness of shock keeping him from feeling the full force of the pain. He still felt it, but he could care less now. He really was going to die. Look, he told himself as the encroaching darkness began to fill his vision. Are you going to sit there and let him win? His eyes opened. Didn't you promise yourself that you would protect them, that you would not let them die? He heard the voice off to the side, and he could see Walter standing there, a slight glare to his eyes. I know you're afraid right now, Naruto. You are on the precipice of death, but… His voice changed, it became a determined snarl of words that rushed to urge him on. What I came to realize is that fear. That's the worst of it. That's the real enemy. So get up. Naruto felt his Reishi build once more, even as the man continued to speak. Get out in this real world and kick that bastard as hard as you can, right in the teeth. Zabuza turned, feeling a rain of pressure build all around his body, freezing him to the spot. He turned about as best he could, seeing the most surprising thing that day, the most strange and terrifying one too. A figure stood be the fallen form of Naruto, a chain connecting the two, a dark and mysterious being with naught but a fear-inducing bleakness to it. The thing itself wore a wide-brimmed fedora, just as red as the scarlet trench coat set on his shoulders. Beneath that he wore a black vest and white buttoned shirt. Black pants and boots ended at his legs and feet. The thing before him pulled his white-gloved hands from his pockets and grabbed hold of the Zanpakuto. Bring can be filled, Hacho o Mimishita, blast my enemies to vapor, Dejina Hito. The flash emitted from the sword, nearly blinding Zabuza, and a second flash burst from behind the strange being's back just between his trench coat. What was left of the sword was in place a weapon made only from nightmares. It had a severely curved axe handle leading up to the hinge point of a wide saw cleaver, the teeth of which pointed away from his hand, whilst a sharp edge was retained around to the inside. Zabuza suspected that it had a trigger, allowing it to swing out and extend its reach. Despite this, Zabuza growled, even as the thing before him lifted its head, showing him a shaggy lock of blonde hair. Covering the boy's eyes were tinted goggles. That's wrong, Zabuza, don't recognize me in my Shikai form. The young lad adjusted the goggles, showing his sapphire eyes despite the red tint of the shades. Don't you remember the vibrance of my weapon? He lifted the saw cleaver up and slashed away the chain that bound him to his body. Come now Zabuza, that was the old me, without that chain, I can no longer live inside it. But, you can still destroy my spiritual form. Or are you afraid? That's the worst of it, isn't that true, Zabuza? Shut up you bastard. Zabuza screamed, having enough of this crap. Who did he care that this boy came back with new-looking stuff? It didn't matter. He was still just a weak, insignificant tool. He rushed Naruto, blade swinging out wildly, his aggression pouring into his movements, a bull going head first into the unknown. Naruto ducked beneath the flash of silver and sidestepped the next, after that he brought his blade up, blocking the strike. The force behind it was enough to make Naruto skid back on his feet, but he did not stumble, he only lifted his blade up again. Zabuza! He shouted, even as the devil of the mist swung against him. We are more than tools. We are people, we have feelings. We aren't just products to be used in war. Naruto screamed, trying to get the man's attention. Zabuza merely threw several kunai at him, to which the boy used the flat of the cleaver as a shield, the throwing knives pinging off harmlessly. Shut it. Zabuza retorted. No Zabuza. You have to listen, I don't want you to die without hearing me. Naruto shouted back, dodging the blade once more, his own anger stirring. He had to get the man to listen before he delivered the killing blow to the man. If he didn't, he knew the man would regret it. Ranjiku had told him the basics of what happened to dead and those who did terrible things in life. If the man died without coming to the realization, then hell would become the devil's home. Then, it came to him. Don't you have someone who is precious to you? Zabuza stopped, flinching underneath the weight of the boy's words. That is none of your business. The man bellowed, arsing his blade down in a single, large, sweep of strength. Shink. Naruto caught the larger blade between the serrated teeth of his own cleaver. With a snapping twist, he shattered the blade, forcing the man to stumble back in shock. Naruto didn't stop there, no, he lifted his saw cleaver up into the air, pointing heavenward. Sudasuresa. And he swung down, scarlet Reishi exploded out point blank into the man, sending him flying back, far across the bridge, high above the dwindling thugs that Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke were slowly destroying. Thud. He hit the ground, bouncing and sliding some before coming to a halt. He felt nothing coming from his chest to the side of his hip, it was all numb and gone. He could barely see, the sky ever expanding before him. His eyes couldn't focus right, his ears ringing, everything was just numb. Naruto was there, a moment later, standing over him, his brows lifted and his lips frowning. Was the boy sad that he was dying? Was this lad so compassionate that he cared even for his enemies? How could it be that he, Zabuza Momoichi, would die by a soft-hearted boy's hand? In the end, Zabuza didn't fight the exhaustion like he would have, instead, he asked Naruto one last favor, his tone however weak, still held that ambitious way. Please kill Gato. Naruto nodded, leaving him there. He was about to close his eyes and let it be over with when he heard a moan. His mind instantly knew who it was even as he turned his head to look. There lay Haku, face first into the earth. Something urged him to move to her, even if it would be painful. He turned himself over, using his single working arms to pull himself closer to the ice user. Inch after painful inch, he made his slow way towards the lass, his eyes pleaded for her to still be alive. He made it, using that arm of his to pull her into him. Dark eyes opened to see his. Beautiful. She was beautiful, her brown hair cascading down around her, her broken body all for him to hold for the last moments. A dark spot appeared on her scorched clothes, and the devil of the hidden mist realized that he was crying. He didn't hold those hot tears back, he just let them flow. Zabuza-sama. Her voice. God. How could he ever not notice it before? It held him there for a moment, a silence between them. He leaned into the crook of her neck, feeling like his head would burst any second. Haku. He cried. I am so sorry, I put you through this. I should have never. Her dainty hand was on his face, on his cheek, where the blast had knocked his bandage wraps off, that soft palm against his rough visage. As best as she could, she leaned into him, giving him a kiss, so brief, yet holding him in it. When she could no longer hold herself there, she fell back from his starstruck face. I have always cared for you. I love you, Zabuza. Her eyes dimmed, graying slowly until they were but slates of stone, and he knew then that she was gone. No. No. Haku. Please, stay with me. No. Don't leave me. He began to wail out in great sorrow, feeling a weight settle on him as his own life began to slip away. Haku. His scream pierced the air as his tears came rushing down her face, streaking his cheeks and falling onto her. His cries of pain were even making the thugs on the bridge stop their fighting, feeling the regret in the man's dying words. They all bowed their heads to the loss of someone precious that day, honoring the dead in that moment. Gato was running. His breath caught in his throat, hitched and shallow, while his little legs tried so desperately to carry him as fast as they could, strained beneath the suit and pants, sweat pouring down his chubby face. The man had bare witness to the blonde lad's power, he had seen Zabuza cut down and thrown like some soft rag doll, he saw the boy die and come back. His fear was only elicited more when, before the boy went after the fallen Zabuza, spotted him. It was not the act of spotting him that Gato had feared, now he knew that feeling grow as some great terror. But no, it was what he had done when Gato was spotted. So sickening and revolting was the act, the very movement all but leaving him frozen. It was an act that even angels would weep upon. He grinned, lips parted from ear to ear, a wide grimace of what should have been teeth, yet not to be. He remembered those pearly whites, flashing beneath the fold of his eyes, inside his mind still haunting and reaping for his very soul. Sharp and poised as if already there to tear him asunder. Sharper than even a razor's own edge, sinking deep, as if he were to devour him whole. His head turned back, to see if he had been followed. No looming figure of madness presented itself, no far and dark insanity preying on him, scouring for him. His head spun back around, intent to continue his run, to get as far away as possible, to escape the jagged fangs of death. When he fully did turn, he slammed his feet deep into the earth, scrunching his dress shoes and grinding himself to a stop. His heart pounded, beating like flexing fingers snapping out to grapple, clenching like it was the last thing his heart would do. His eyes nearly fell into blank slates of terror, wide and uncommonly filled with such fear, two wounds filled with nothing but gaping fright. His body trembled, his fingers and hands were the limbs of a tree in the weltering gale of a never-ending storm. The boy grinned beneath his tinted round goggles, those prominent canines, they bored deep into Gato's shaken soul. It was absolute terror. It was madness. Insanity taken form. He saw the blade rise like a forlorn godly hand. It swung on its hinge. And suffer in hell, forever. As the blade swept from its great powerful arc of death, slicing through his thick fat neck, Gato had one single thought, the word coming out as an afterthought, as his life slipped through the cracks of his own earthly form, and it was thus. Cold. Gato's head rolled away, and a similar translucent figure raised itself from out of nowhere. It had a chain from its chest to that of the fallen Gato's. Naruto came up to it and swiftly cut its chain, from bare chest to where it had connection. He stood a few paces back and let what would happen, uncaring for the man even now. The crack of green lightning began to gnaw at the air, growing in rapid success as its sound reverberated from the sky. All sinister light banged against the reality of the ninja world, demanding, forcing its own entrance into this living world. Sudden in its appearance, so too was its final wave, bursting from the sky in two scarlet gates, hate seeming to eat from the fabrics of its existence, brilling out in a swath of hot molten air. On this grandiose door was two skeletons of gigantic origins, eye patches on opposite sides. Their two giant bony hands opened the door. The heat from before exploded out, seeming to suck in more to satisfy its hunger, insatiable as the ghostly form of Gato peered into the depths of eternal flame. And, just as he had, they shot out like vipers, the accursed mark of those who have committed great atrocities, the chains of a sinner. These very chains rattled out as they struck themselves into the condemned soul of the tyrant. He began to scream, loud and almost unbarring in its tone, as if he were not man, nevermore would he be, but he was now a beast put to slaughter, crying in the pain as he began his descent. His wails were washed away soon though, those thunderous chains, their rattle all-consuming, even as they slung him deeper into the licking folds of the furious flame. Forevermore tying him to the sinister world where all who enter must abandon hope. And then, when he was dragged into the very core of that infernal fire, the shadow of eternal death, no more to be but devastation, the doors of hell shut with a single thunderous crack. Fading into nothingness, its being becoming no more, yet still looming and ever present, nevermore yet forevermore, to be but not to be. The young lad, Naruto, left with no heavy heart, only the blood of a wicked man dripping from his saw cleaver. Once the whiskered blonde returned, the villagers had arrived with farming and fishing tools, soon driving out Gato's former men. This eased the folk, and joy, unending joy, poured out of them, a dam bursting forth all that has been welled up inside for so long. To us, it was like the liberation of France, a great oppression ended by a swift blade, cutting the head of the treacherous being, who cared not for those he was owner of. The people of Wave went back into town and began planning some great celebration, one that Team 7 was invited to. When they heard the stories of how it all went down, they elected Naruto as a hero, giving him praise, singing out his name on high, swearing on their very land that they would spread word of his great deed. He smiled and thanked them for that. Yet, as they did all this, preparing for the celebration, they left behind Team 7 on the bridge. Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura all staring at Naruto with disbelief or a questioning glare. The latter spread to the hot Aki more than anyone else. Is that your body?" Sakura asked, fear inspiring behind her eyes when she saw his new visage. He only nodded a bit grimly. Kakashi came up to him and shook his head, hands in his pockets. "You know, if you tried to explain all this perfectly clear, I still wouldn't understand. So, instead, let's just bury your and the others' bodies who died." The man's words were stern, as if he wanted no one to speak, so stricken by the entire ordeal. Maybe he just didn't want the headache, but Naruto couldn't tell if it were one way or the other. But, as of now, he had a job to do. He told the scarecrow-like man that he would like to personally bury Zabuza and Haku. Kakashi, caring little, waved him off to do so. Naruto swept up the pieces of Zabuza's sword in his hand and took out a scroll from the dark of his blood-red trench coat, sealing the pieces away. Then, the blonde headed to the opposite side of the bridge, going towards where Zabuza and Haku had fallen. When he got there, he saw what he expected, the spectral form of both his former enemy and inspiration. The translucent beings turned to face him, surprised to actually see in the first place, but there remained that quirk of the brow, a small frown perched on their lips. "Yo." Naruto greeted, feeling a slight smile come onto his own face. Zabuza was about to speak when he was interrupted by Naruto. "Listen, I know you're confused, but I want to do one more thing for you. That's the least I could do." The whiskered blonde told, his voice soothing. "I am going to transport you to a place called Soul Society. It's like heaven, or at least, it's where you'd want to go. And, you can keep fighting, you can become a shiny. Naruto, as long as I can stay with Haku, I don't care where we go. The only thing I want from you is to make sure my sword gets repaired, you know. It's got a special sealing that when it get blood on it, it can repair itself. That thing got me through a lot, and I don't expect that I will be able to take it with me, so, please, look after my Kakirabacho, would you kindly?" Zabuza's voice was not rough or demanding, nor did he plead, it was calm, self-reassured, trusting that the boy would do by him the rightly thing to do. Naruto smiled a bit bigger, nodding. "Yeah." After tapping both their heads with the bottom of his saw cleaver's pommel, transporting them to Soul Society together, Naruto raised his sword over and onto his back, the wraps on his pommel extending around the cleaver and round his back. Naruto buried their bodies side by side, fashioning crosses as a makeshift headstone. Then, he joined the rest of his team, making clones to make the process come along faster. While this happened, in the Sirte, Ranjiku could be seen sitting in a chair, thinking on what had transpired the past few days. First, she learns that someone actually made it into the Sirte, caused some havoc. She then heard that they had tried to fight Byakuya to save Rukia from her execution. They were spirited away by Uruchi, potentially to achieve Bankai. Then, she witnessed some things herself. Namely, the one that shook the last to her core was Ichimaru's betrayal, having fled with Aizen and some others before they could be stopped. It left a bad taste in her mouth. Jin was like her big brother, he inspired her to become a Shinigami, he was the sole reason she was even alive. But now, she sat thinking, wondering if the decision she was going to make was the best. She wanted to end what others were calling a coming war. She admitted the idea, it was ridiculous, and even if the head captain decided to allow her to go through with it, she knew it would make life hard on Naruto. But, even with the release of Rukia from execution and her reinstatement, Ranjiku was sure that the old man would bellow at her, throwing every rule in the Sirte at her. But, maybe he can help us. Boo. The orange-haired lass nearly leapt out of her skin, falling out of the chair she was in. She whipped about, already knowing who it was. Hashiro. You frightened me. She screamed, a nervous smile etched to her cheeks. He didn't answer, he remained stoic, unsure in what to say to her at first. Ranjiku, he finally spoke, getting her attention. You have been sitting here for some time, what is troubling you? He asked, brows knit a slight, showing he was truly concerned. The woman stood, feeling as though she were already on trial. He watched her as she bit her lip, a nervous tick. For a while, she said nothing, just standing there, saying nothing. I think that I know a way to help Soul Society in case Aizen returned, but I need to speak with the head captain. Her voice was serious, but she hesitated, her normally boisterous self slightly deflated. He only nodded. A day or two went by until they could finally speak with Yamamoto, but when they did, and she had a chance to explain her plan concerning Naruto, the old man's bellow of incredulous anger nearly shattered the roof. Back with Naruto, he and the others had celebrated with the villagers of Wave, parting with them a day after. As they left, Tazuna named the bridge after Zabuza and Haku, on Naruto's behest. He told the man that they were just mercenaries, having been brought in by Gato and his money, seeking only their own path, not truly a force bent on his or the villagers' destruction. Being old and seeing the world as he has, Tazuna agreed, understanding the young lad's request. Team 7 made their way back to Konohagakure, Kakashi remaining silent and aloof, even as he read his Icha. Sakura found herself skipping back, happy to be headed home. Sasuke actually had the smallest itty-bitty smile on his face, content with the mission and the results, even though he had a distaste for the unpleasantness that had occurred. Naruto however was checking out his new outfit. I can't believe it, this thing is cool. My Shikai is awesome, Hacho Omimashita and Dejina Hito. I can't wait to show them to Ranjiku. Haha. Naruto's thoughts were that of pride, so jovial to have his Shikai. He could hardly believe his luck, he further couldn't believe that he could achieve Bankai one day. How could anything else be as awesome as what he had now? Ludicrous, insane, there was no way. Hell, the outfit that came with it may as well be a part of his Shikai, he felt as though it made him stronger, faster, yet it held a sense of protection for him, as if it would at the very least slow down a sword from cutting him down. His eyes were sharper, better, so too were the rest of his senses, in tune with his body and the world around him. Not to mention, the surprise beneath his lips. It scared the living hell into Gato. Such sharp teeth. He felt himself grin, having dealt the man his punishment. The day went by as they slowly made their way towards Konoha, coming to the gates and entering with pride, having finished their first real mission. Kakashi, before he left, told them to take a few days of leave, take time to relax, and meet him once more in the training ground they took the bell test in. With a peace sign as his parting leave, he shunshined away, off to wherever it is he goes. Sasuke was about to head towards his own home in the former Uchiha district when Naruto grabbed him by the shoulder. The dark-haired boy turned towards his teammate, almost having to look up at the red-cloaked lad, and raised a questioning brow. Naruto leaned down a slight, whispering into Sasuke's ear. You should really hang out with Sakura for today. He leaned back, patting him on the shoulder, a slight smile on his face, just before he suddenly flash-stepped away, leaving Sasuke with a pinket. The Avenger's gaze fell back on the lass, and he suddenly became nervous. Why was she blushing? Why was she trying to avoid eye contact? Why? He breathed in, then out. Hey, Sakura, wanna go get something to eat? Naruto was just at his door to his apartment when he felt a shift in the air, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted in that moment. He only shrugged, figuring it was nothing, only assuming that he did not care. His white-gloved hand reached out to the door handle, turning it, pushing the door wide open. Now, imagine his surprise when Ranjiku, he yelled upon seeing her sitting there on his couch, civilian clothes on and bags upon bags in the corner of the room. Her gaze shifted up to his, a bit surprised herself, not recognizing him at first, until he removed his scarlet fedora and tinted goggles. She jumped up and rushed him, slamming into his frame, nearly sending him out the door. Naruto. She screamed, a smile on her face. The curvy woman found herself looking back up, noticing that he was almost eye to eye. He suddenly hugged her back, lifting her from her spot. With one hand wrapped around her, he shut the door, next he began to spin her, a grin on his face. When Matsumoto became too dizzy, he set her down. "Why are you here?" he asked, his tone more ecstatic than his words themselves. She took a moment to answer him, but when she did, Naruto hardly believed his own ears. "I am not a Soul Reaper anymore." His mouth hung agape. "Now don't get me wrong, I did not quite, I am still a Shinigami technically. The thing is that I have been given clearance to teach you and make you stronger." She grinned and held up an arm, as if to show off that she was muscular. Ranjiku was not, but she was still very strong. "But why?" Naruto asked a moment later, knowing that she wouldn't just drop everything like that to teach him. Her face grew dull, she lowered her arm. Ranjiku told him everything. Explained the events that happened when she returned to the Sirte a few days before. She went on, telling him of the deal she made with the head captain, that she could teach him and make him strong, so long as he helps in defeating Aizen or at least protect Soul Society when an attack began. The other condition was that if in a few weeks, you can give one of the captains of the Gate 13 a challenge, then I may remain here as long as I want. It is so that he can make sure you are truly helpful in the war that will ensue. It took a moment for her words to sink in, and when they did, he merely asked her one more question. "What happens if I cannot fight the captain?" Ranjiku's face faltered, her brows knit with a slight sorrow. Her lips, her beautiful lips, they did curve down in a fearful frown. Her hands held one another, as if it would comfort her. When she finally did speak, it was a heavy tone, low and almost tearful. "They will have us both executed." His eyes widened, a slight brows raised, mouth hung agape. For a moment, he thought about leaving to tell Gigi, but he still stood there, on wooden legs. Ranjiku honestly thought he was going to shout at her. She thought he was going to kick her out and tell her never to come back. But he did not, he did the one thing she did not expect of him. "Ha. Really? Is that all? I'll take that challenge." He laughed, his voice and face lighting up with a jovial sense. At first, her serious side wanted to smack him and remind him of the depth the consequences held, she really did, but… "My god. It is funny," she bellowed, laughing along. It really wasn't, the prospect of death was not a fine idea to her, she however didn't much care. This boy, was he even that? Was growing about as fast as the Kurosaki kid, and he defeated the battle-crazed Kenpachi. So, if anyone could stand up to Aizen and his forces, it was this new generation, with their wills, with all that they are, that burning flame that was that will in their chests. Suddenly, she was scooped up and on the couch. For a moment, she stopped her laughing, thinking he was going to start something. He quickly threw off his crimson trench coat and vest, something clanking beneath them, thus leaving him in a nice undershirt. Ranjiku's thoughts wandered as he kicked his heavy boots off, knocking them to a corner. Heck, even his white gloves came off. With one hand on the couch he leaned down to her. "I'll make some lunch." He then proceeded to vault over the furniture, almost flying into the kitchen with the force. Ranjiku was still on the couch, her breath as warm as her cheeks. Hadn't it been moments ago he did that? It felt like it was a memory already. Her form quivered at the prospect. Did he do that on purpose, or did he sincerely want to make lunch before they trained? By the clattering in the kitchen, she was right. Now, despite common belief or what most would think of Ranjiku, she did not just jump someone's bones when she felt like it, nor had she done so much if at all. Finding the memory of if she had ever done so got lost when you live for so long. Not only that, but she wasn't also the person to get so excited so easily, usually she was the one who did the exciting. Yet. Here she sat, cheeks flushed, feeling like she had been worked up. She was suddenly aware of her name being called. Ranjiku's voice was numb. "I said, do you want ramen or dango?" he asked gently once more. The orange-haired lass sat up straighter, preferring the ramen at the moment. He nodded his thanks and the clattering continued. Eventually, she shook herself from the euphoria, clearing her throat some before deciding to get up from the couch. She walked over towards the kitchen and saw him cooking away. A part of her wanted to escalate what he could have done, but decided based on the growl from her stomach to instead ask if there were anything she could do. No, I got this. When you live alone for almost over 12 odd years, you learn to cook or eat out all the time. I don't get too much money to do the latter." Ranjiku shrugged and decided to just take a nap on the couch. After some time, lunch was done and she was awakened. They ate quite a bit of ramen, so much so she decided that today they wouldn't train after all. She said that if they even tapped each other near the gut they'd burst. He laughed at that. Soon after, Naruto lay down on the couch and she joined him, laying in front of him. The whiskered lad did not object, he merely sunk in deeper as his arms snaked around her. Her dainty hands clutched his as they both began to feel sleep envelop them. Deep into the depths of the seal on Naruto's belly, behind large and encumbering bars, lay the Kyuubi. Into the darkness its massive body lay, its magnificent scarlet fur draped around its powerful form, all 9 of its tails spread out like tufts of clouds, yet each strong enough to flatten a mountain. It felt a strange presence just before the cage, but did not open its eyes. "So, we finally meet, don't we, Kyuubi?" Naruto asked, standing in the ankle-deep waters of the seal. "Man," was the only response, as if it were a casual meeting, despite the deep bass of its tone. He took a moment to speak, deciding on his words. "Don't you get lonely here?" The Kyuubi took pause, then said, "No, now go away." But the sigh, Naruto sat in the water. The Kyuubi opened its huge eyes, a glare to its gaze. It looked down on the whiskered blonde, steam beginning to pour out as its anger increased. Its lips curled back, a snarl in the back of its throat. "Why are you still here?" Its deep voice was like rolling thunder, rising out from some distance. "I am not leaving." Naruto was adamant to remain despite the beast, as the 9 tails began to rise from the depths of the darkness. "Go away. I want nothing to do with you." The Kyuubi roared, slamming into the pillars of steel that were the seal. Naruto did not flinch, he remained as he was, seated in the water without fear. "I hate humanity. So why would I want its company? I have lived for so long, and throughout that time humans have done little to change my opinion. Go away. Now." The Kyuubi bellowed out in rage, slamming again and again into the bars with more force than the last blow before. But Naruto, he did not move an inch. The 9 tails stopped, breath coming out in great gouts of steam, its own rage heating the normally cool room. It sat on its haunches and decided to at least hear the human speak, no use in trying to break what could not be broken. But that didn't mean the Kyuubi would agree with anything the human spoke of. Clearing his throat, Naruto began to speak. "I know you aren't happy being in there, I know you would rather crush my skull in the village if you got out. But, I also know how it is to be alone. I know what it means for everyone to hate you, and for you to hate them. Kyuubi, I don't know why you went on a rampage, and I don't want to, and I know my words won't change you, but I forgive you, because I know more than anyone what being alone means." He paused, as if considering his words carefully. "I want to give you a chance to live again, outside me." The Kyuubi's brows fell, no longer glaring at the young lad, but now having its curiosity piqued by the meaning of his words. "What would you say if I can get you a body to live in? It will be human, but you can be free." The 9 tails gaze softened, thinking on his words for some time. Being in human form wasn't the worst it could be a slug. "What do you get out of this?" "Nothing. Just a sympathizer." "How do I know you just don't want my power?" "I have enough already, you can keep your chakra." The Kyuubi looked into Naruto's face for deceit where it could find none. It tried to reason against this, the thought of agreeing with a human once more, but his face held no lies, and his words all in the giant beast's favor. The Kyuubi found itself coming to a conclusion. "Freedom, huh?" Then, it forced light to flood the inside of its cage, illuminating its grandiose form. Naruto smiled softly, seeing that the Kyuubi was agreeing with wait, what is it doing? Why is the Kyuubi shrinking? "What are you doing?" Naruto shouted, incredulous. "If I am to be in human form on the outside, then I have to get used to it," the Kyuubi told, as if its continuous shrinking was normal, as if it were an everyday occurrence. When it began to come to that of a human size, the 9 tails was swiftly enveloped in a swath of steam, circling once for that moment, leaving the blonde to what it was doing whilst hidden. The clouds of white dissipated moments later, leaving behind something Naruto did not expect. "You're a girl. Woman," was the being's pensive response. Naruto gawked for some time, taking in her looks. Her looks. Her, not a he but her. The great monster that could kill mankind with such ease was now a human woman though, to be fair, she still held onto her large crimson fox ears, scarlet slitted eyes, and 9 tails. Even the red hair on her head was human, just a little long. Kyuubi herself wore simple green shorts and black tank top, not stylish but, then again, being a giant fox without clothes, probably left you numb to the want of flashy things. This being was human, beautiful in all sense of the word, yet could still kill with a flick of her now slim wrists. "What? I did not expect that you would be a girl. First of all woman, second of all what gender did you expect, male?" The last bit held distaste at the prospect of being that. Naruto found a grin creep its way to his whiskered cheeks. "More like an it." There was a pause. "I will devour your bones." Finally, Naruto had to laugh at the Kyuubi. It was far too funny. Having such a powerful being, who could still honestly crush him, was actually a woman with a bit of a bad attitude, which he understood why. But, in the end, he laughed because she could make him, even if she didn't realize it. The kitsune began shaking her head, sighing in her diminutive aggravation. "Humans. Foxy ladies." He grinned. Just naming it as I see it. Naruto chuckled, a sly grin on his face. Soon after, he stood, cracking his neck, popping and stretching his joints, letting out satisfied grunts when the pops did come. His gaze went to Kyuubi with a warm smile on his face. What? Again, that pensive aggravated voice. Just, you are aware that if you walk around like that when you're out, you're gonna have to beat off men with sticks. He told. Her nose scrunched up in response. How long until I can anyway? Kyuubi asked, still looking as though she wanted to slug him. Naruto saw that expression, knowing she probably wanted to, but he also knew that he had her by a rope. Or, as they say, he was the one with leverage, so he teased her some. How about I just leave and not tell you when I will have it done? His grin split his face then as her lips came down to a frown. How about you just tell me now? Her voice was a bit demanding, if not downright salty. All these flavors you could be, and yet, you chose to be salty. The whiskered blonde's grin came full force then, actually giving her a small fright. He stopped grinning and asked why she flinched, coming closer to the large bars. Even in my human form, I don't have fangs as big as that. Fear was wiped from her voice then, if only sounding unsettled. Naruto shrugged. Hums with a shikai, neat, huh? Turning around, he began to fade, ready to awaken from the seal. Wait, you're just leaving. His head turned, a brow beeped. Millimeters, never mind, just go. She told, her voice escalating to a growl as her brows knit in slight anger, nose turned away from him. His eyes lifted a slight, but he just turned back around as his body began to disappear from her view. Just before he was completely gone, he threw up a slack peace sign. When all of him was not in sight, Kyuubi let out a sigh of relief, a stark flush on her face. Her crimson-slitted orbs glared down at her slender open hand. Fingers tightened to a balled fist, white knuckles against her usually soft skin. Naruto-kun, so suddenly, you've grown into a young man. And finally, a smile broke the ranks and onto her pretty face. The sun hung high in the sky, stark and bright against the heaven, a few scattered clouds wisping about. Down below the bright shine of day lay a particular land, a high ridge the size of a few football fields, yet still holding vegetation all but a few good yards towards the center, leaving that grassy ground bare of the trees that hung near the edge. All around that ridge were mountainous landmass, engrossed with pines for the most part and some oaks, other trees spread near and between and all around. A river split the land, coming from a nearby waterfall that came from one of the huge mountains, gushing forth its own life-giving liquid out to the land. On one such of these ridges were both Naruto, scarlet trench coat and all, and Ranjiku in her Shinigami clothes, both opposite of one another. It had been but a day since she returned with the news, and now they, right here, stood with joy, training for when the captain of who they still did not know of would come and gauge Naruto's strength. It would be at least a week at the very least, and so they had limited time. But they made full extent of this time, starting early, taking breaks every few hours, stopping for but a few minutes for rest. They were back at it now, Zanpakuto either strapped round the back or sheathed at the side. They waited for the other to draw. Waited for either or the other to suddenly grasp the handle of their weapons and try to attack, and when they did, the other would spring out, bursting forth like a rocket to quickly meet the other's blade. They waited. 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 Naruto was patient, peering past his red-tinted goggles, beneath his scarlet fedora his gaze did watch. His eyes were locked onto the woman's with rapt attention, just ready for any change in her serious expression. The eyes, they did speak volumes, and hers screamed for the want for action now, she desired to draw her blade against him and do battle. He imagined he had the same look, just as well. Both really never knew who moved first, only that they had. With Shunpo at their feet, they rushed one another, both drawing their blades, hers swinging out into cross, his coming up and down, even as the wraps were undone. The teeth of his cleaver crashed into the smooth curve of her blade, meeting his jagged tooth one. They soon leapt at one another in wild, barely controlled swings, going all out, as best as they could, putting all they had into each and every swing. Even as they fought, Naruto knew she could, at any time, pull out her Shikai's special ability, little bits of particles that might as well be her sword ready to slash him to redded pieces. But he knew, as she knew, that he could do the same, pull the trigger on his cleaver, and start swinging bursts of Sudasuresa at her. Now, there was a good reason they held themselves from doing so, and the reason being sound and agreed between the two that if they did every time they fought for simple practice, they would have to find a new ridge to fight on every single time. So, they settled for good old sword play, or at least, sword to saw cleaver play. Whatever have you. They continued their assault on one another, ascending into the very air and onto the sky. Naruto snapped his body back, soon, twisting away from the ash cat, bringing his blade to bear on her. It came onto hers with a heavy toll like from that of a bell, so much force that it sent her away from the Ryatsu under her feet, breaking such a hold against the heaven. He came flying down after her with the flat tip of his blade, a makeshift spear coming down from heavenward. Ranjiku slowed her descent as fast as she could, forcing Ryatsu around her, plunging her blade into the ground as she did meet it. The orange-haired lass kicked and spun herself around the handle, a hair's width from getting impaled by the flat edge. She heard the subtle shoo of a flash step and Ranjiku froze to the spot, not even bothering to pull her blade from the earth. She gave a backwards glance at him and knew without a doubt that he had her. So, close quarters, my saw cleaver extended out, the actual blade end to your throat, with it being in a reverse grip. How do you feel about your chances with getting out? Naruto's grin, she did not see, but knew it was wide, splitting his face from ear to ear, all teeth. Or, large emasculating fangs as sharp as the blade that was pressed to her jugular. Yep, her chances of escape were little if viable at all, but he needn't know that. They are fantastic. His eyes widened a hair, her voice dropping to that tone. Her voice then holding his mind for a split second of thoughts she knew he was thinking, and although she would have loved to tease him about it, she took full advantage of that split second. All was a blur to Naruto, all in a few moments, in a few movements, and she had subdued him. The swift takedown left him a slight bit dazed, and he knew even as she sat atop him, that he was without his saw cleaver. Though, on a plus or pluses when you added the view, she too was without Zanpakuto. Oh, so they are, he admitted, conceding, though not without a smile. Pervert. She lightly smacked him, smiling with the words. This training went on for a few days, they, coming out to this ridge or the ridge next to it, swinging Zanpakuto against one another, fighting to their best extent. Ranjiku saw him improve with his dexterity to such an extent that he even began using the wraps on the handle to extend his reach, swinging it about like a long chain mace. Even beyond that, he was beginning to win against her in their battles for the past few days. It greatly perturbed her that he was, but when teased about it, she would blame it on the growing heat. Which, if he was being fair, was true. The sun was growing hotter for these past few days, hotter than usual, leaving them sweating when each bout was over. On one particularly hot day, when the sun was seemingly absolute in its tyrant, weltering heat, the rays almost piercing them, Ranjiku found that she had to sit out after the last battle. Despite this and the heat, Naruto decided to continue training, doing a form of shadow boxing with a giant saw cleaver. Pretending as though he had unseen enemies attacking him. He would swing his Zanpakuto all about, wild and tenacious, always moving, never ceasing. He pulled the trigger on Hacho Omimashita, swinging the blade out. With that, he stuck it in the ground for a brief moment. He brought his hand up, hooking his thumb under his goggles and taking his hat off with it. He threw that under the tree where Ranjiku was, followed by his trench coat, vest, and long-sleeve button-down shirt, all thrown by the woman's side. Ranjiku heard a clanking sound when the trench coat fell, but with the excruciatingly hot sun scorching down, she did not question it. Instead, she settled for watching Naruto as he continued his shadow boxing. His movements were a blur, washed away by his own speed, and her eyes were hopelessly lost to the speed at which he could swing that blade about him. Her mind became a blur, just as his movements were, all but losing herself to his training. Time went by, and somehow, the sun reached even under the treetops, but she could not retreat. Too hot. Her thoughts waned. Ranjiku looked back up at Naruto, amazed at how long he was able to keep going even with that godly stamina well beneath that infernal sun. But soon, she noticed his speed decrease, his blurred movements now visible where they were once before not. She could see it on his face, the exhaustion, his eyes in a daze. Yet, still he moved, even when his arms were becoming sluggish. Her eyes moved down from his face, and indeed, his arms were lined with muscle, lean, made to snap out when he swung his Zanpakuto, yet now they were covered in sweat. He was losing steam. Lower still, her gaze fell, seeing his once scrawny back now an even and smooth descent from shoulders down. When his face and body turned a slight towards her, she even saw the defining lines on his stomach and chest. Almost unbidden, she let the top of her Shinigami clothes fall, almost over her large breasts. She felt her slender hands reach up, loosening her haori, even going as far as letting her slim legs spread out. Her eyes drifted back up to Naruto, hoping he wouldn't see what she planned to do, but saw him standing there, completely still in the field, not looking at her, but off somewhere in the distance. The blonde Jinchuriki had stopped, his arms too heavy now for them to move, only holding Hacho Omimashita out straight with a single arm, but then, it began to shake from the exertion. His body rocked, back and forth, beneath the sun, a silent sway. His body seemed to make the choice for him, it seemed, as Naruto dropped the cleaver, arm falling to his side, unable to hold it anymore. And, his legs buckled beneath him, he crumpled to the ground, falling flat-footed onto his back. It took Ranjiku a moment to understand through her hazy mind what had just happened, it lagged on his form, but, when finally her brain comprehended it, she stood on shaky legs. Naruto. She screamed in her hoarse voice, running up to him as best she could. When she reached his side, the orange-haired lass tucked her arms under his neck and back, picking him up. The blonde's body was hot, unconscious and no longer able to move in the heat, and she could only do one thing for him. Ranjiku had to get him under some cool water. The Jinchuriki found himself once more in the seal, already laying down against the watered floor. He sat up, knowing Kyuubi would be there to tell him he was a fool for training in such conditions, let alone continuing even when his body could not take it, just as Ranjiku might, albeit less snob-like. Imagine his surprise when the red-haired lass was forcing her head as far as it could through the bars, brows knit in concern, lip quivering in fear. Fear? What would she have to fear? She could kill without much a thought, so why would she look as though she was afraid? Unless… No, there was no way a being capable of such hatred for man could be fearful of his death, she would merely manifest later. But, he saw her face, that beautiful face veiled in concern for him. With not but tears rearing themselves against her slitted scarlet gaze. Naruto, her voice called. Oh. Ooh, his mind finally clicked. Now he knew why she acted so standoffish. She was a damned tsundere, and only now she was showing it. After all the years she could have just reached to pull him into the seal to talk. Okay, he just had to ask Ranjiku what she put into his ramen this morning. Hey, are you okay? Really had to. Yeah, he answered, regardless of if he was under the influence of whatever it was, and let his body relax. Ranjiku at this moment was probably getting him somewhere to cool him off, knowing she would not just leave him. Despite his honest answer, her lip continued to quiver. Hey, his voice turned soft, reassuring, I swear I am being treated right now, it will be okay. He told. Kyuubi's lip ceased its quivering, but she still looked concerned for him. Naruto smiled a bit brighter, standing up without a stumble, knowing she'd be upset if he didn't show he was even strong enough to stand, and walked over across to the bars. When he reached her, her eyes had to come up to meet his. I'm fine, I really am. His hand reached through the bars, patting her mess of red hair with an almost fatherly glance in his eyes. Her gaze fell, brows furrowed as tears began to stream down her face. Naruto leaned in through, past the bars, holding her with both arms. Her arms, almost weak in her distraught, reached around and locked him in place. Naruto smiled gently, letting her cry into his shoulder for some time. When he finally felt her back away a slight, still holding him by the arms, she apologized. I am so sorry for everything, Naruto, for putting you through pain. Her eyes still watered, but he wiped those tears away from her flushed cheeks. It's fine, was his soft reply, I know you've been so alone, I know you really are sorry. Here, he paused, looked her right in the eyes, and with his reassuring tone, said, it'll be alright, Kyuubi. A second later, he found her lips on his. Naruto's round sapphire eyes widened as her slitted scarlet closed, Kyuubi sunk deep into her kiss, and he was forced deeper into it by her two slender yet unyieldingly strong arms. He tried to pull away, but she wouldn't let him. The red-haired lass almost had to force, as if there was any more forcing could be done, his mouth open, letting herself in without even asking. It took some trying, but he eventually jerked away, falling flat on his butt. I need an adult. He yelled suddenly without really knowing why. Naruto, her whisper of want did not help the situation, any if at all. He gulped down his breath, almost choking on the hot air, and felt himself look at her with a bit of fear. Had she just done that? My god, where did that come from? Naruto's mind raced for reason, tried to figure and sort out his wound thoughts, but his eyes fled to her face and saw it turn from wanton lust back into the almost teary-eyed glint of concern. Oh no, she wanted him. She hadn't meant to hurt him. Now he had to look at what he had done, making a girl come to tears once more. He stood, stepping back up at the bars, almost stepping through them. Naruto, I didn't mean to do that. Her voice trembled. He couldn't help himself, he yielded to that desperate tone of worry. Shaking his own head, Naruto told her it was fine, taking his step into the cage. Really? Kyuubi asked, voice cracking a slight. Yes. He held her again once more, expecting her to do the same, but was surprised when she didn't. When his eyes came back to hers, he found that they no longer watered, her lip did not quiver, her brows were no longer in that knit of concern. Instead, on her cheeks, spread out across her face, was a deep red blush, her gaze coming full circle to that of the lustfulness he had seen yet before. He had a single thought, one cognitive ponder, just before she pounced atop him. Oh, shy. I am an adult. A few more days passed since that day, and even then Naruto felt like he could skip down the Konoha streets. Maybe he had, given the strange looks people had given him. Meh, he didn't care though, his only goal to get home from the team meetings and see his little orange lass. Ranjiku would greet him with a bright smile, and he would smile just the same, picking her up and spinning her round. Ah, the most beautiful giggle would escape her lips, a schoolgirl like one taboot. Sometimes, at night, he would watch her sleep just before he did, so content in seeing his little angel dream. But now he was sitting down in the training ground with his teammates, Kakashi standing there before them, explaining that in a few days there would be a chunin exam, allowing them to move up on the kinds of missions they could do and get better pay and compensation. He gave a lazy speech of how dangerous it was, the actual paper exam and the one where they would go into the forest of death. The Scarecrow Man was about finished when Naruto spoke up. "How long will the exam be? When it starts?" Depending on how long you guys take on the second half, a few days," Kakashi answered, raising a brow to the blonde. Naruto adjusted his fedora over his eyes and smirked, hand keeping Kakashi from seeing the fangs. With a nod, Naruto stood, quickly making himself smile to hide his frightening visage. His hand fell away, and he could only say one thing to what the man said. "Good." All around confused about the strange behavior of the young man, Kakashi shrugged and dismissed the team for the day. Sasuke tried to leave, but found Sakura around his arm. His onyx gaze fell to her emerald ones. "What?" His voice was decidedly indifferent. "I think she wants you to take her home," Naruto told as his beepy tone passed by with him. Sighing, Sasuke felt regret. It was like when you fed a stray cat, after that, they always came back. And, he had to admit, she was annoying, loud, and unagreeable at times, lots of times, especially when he tried to train. Always watching and keeping him from focusing on what he wanted to do. She aggravated him to no end. Sasuke took a breath in and let his eyes fall back onto the pinket. He let a breath of deflated pride come out. If he had to be fair about it, she wasn't that bad, the mission to wave stealing her a bit when it came to fights. Plus, she was not as grating as he thought before. Maybe he was just stressed or something, he didn't know. Though, if he had to admit anything, which was rare, he would say she was cute, kinda like a large-eyed, pink-haired cat that was always climbing on your shoulder. Fine. The boy receded, taking her with him, just reluctantly. Naruto found a chuckle escape his lips as he used Shunpo to get home, ready to get some ramen in his belly before training. He wondered if Sakura and Sasuke would actually date some, if so, he didn't think it would be that bad. She might stop complaining about not being with her Sasuke-kun all the time. Maybe he'd find a way to get that shouting out of her, take her around the village, anything. Bah, it wasn't Naruto's place to make of what will happen, he was just happy that he could at least get some of the loud mouth out of Sakura. The blonde Jinchuriki stood in front of his door, hand on the knob, about to go in. However, he neglected to turn it over and come inside. Something was off. The arrow above the door was taut, hung with a string from a bow, as if some archer was just waiting to sling the arrow of devastation on him, right when he opened this very door. The whiskered blonde just had to open it. Just had to turn the handle. Just had to push this piece of oak open, close the door behind. He was but an inch and a half from that arrow and its stinging blow. But a few minutes before, Ranjiku sat atop a rock on one of the ridges Naruto and her trained on. She wore her civilian attire, a simple yet bright pink t-shirt, white skirt coming to her knees, and yellow sneakers. She was trimming her nails, a file in one hand, the look of someone who was expecting something. "When will the human be here?" came an impatient tone. She forgot the main reason why she was sitting on a rock, on a ridge, out in the middle of the surrounding forest, waiting for her Naruto to arrive. Her sky blue eyes shifted lazily up to the captain, giving her a glance of indifference. "Isn't patience a virtue?" she asked, adding, "I thought the captain of the assassination corps would be far more willing to wait for her foes to come to her, right Sui-Fong?" The 2nd Division captain of the Gato 13, a petite woman with all the standard Shinigami clothes. She had dark eyes, hair short with 2 wraps of braids coming down to end with large yellow rings. The shorter woman was not very happy to have been chosen for this specific test, believing it was below her attention. She made that known. "I do not care who you think he is but a speck, one that if the captain commander had ordered, I would have wiped clean. Do not forget my rank, Ranjiku, I will do the same to you under the command." Sui-Fong was livid when she said that, but she reserved her yell and let her words roll over with the threat she gave. To her ire, Ranjiku merely yawned. Sui-Fong said nothing though, keeping her words within herself, letting the annoyance pass by. She was a captain after all, and what was but a slight annoyance to her? No, she would not allow such inert feelings of anger get the best of her. She was a rock. Sui-Fong reminded herself, a rock that let all water pass over and around it, nothing, and no one could bother her, so long as she held control over hers. "You know, he'll be pretty mad when he finds out you abducted me." "What?" Sui-Fong found herself slip, confusion knitting her brows. Ranjiku merely got off her rock and began to give herself some distance from her and the shorter woman. Then, when she was far enough, the orange-haired lass shouted back with, "Yeah, he won't fight hard unless you're going to kill him or his friends." "What does that have to do with?" "Bam. A rising ire had been cut when suddenly someone had slugged her a good one across the face, sending her pinwheeling through dirt and earth before she finally forced her hand into the ground, correcting her rocketing body with a flip, landing square on her feet. Her captain's cloak had been ripped from her body in the tumble across the land, that much she knew, but little else was harmed. Sui-Fong's darkly eyed gaze raised up to her attacker, furious that someone got the drop on her. Naruto stood there with his fist still out, his own fury rising just as the Reishi was around him, a dark pulse of crimson it was, wafting around with its owner's own anger. Naruto wanted nothing more than to slug the woman across from him again, harder this time, but knew she was aware of him. This time he knew she'd probably be able to dodge it or block. His eyes slid over to Ranjiku, seeing that she was okay. He knew from the note that she wasn't really in immediate danger, it sounded much like a "Save me Prince" from the menacing dragon kind of letter. But that didn't mean that this woman, this captain, was going to deviate from her orders and not kill them if he failed this test. "Who are you?" "Ah," she spoke, finally. "Naruto Uzumaki, who are you?" he asked in turn, still angry. "Sui-Fong." Naruto nodded a slight and reached for his Zanpakuto on his back. Before he could, however, Sui-Fong was in front of him, her Zanpakuto released, forming some kind of black and yellow gauntlet around her arm, a piece extending out as a sharp-pointed stinger on her middle finger. He rocked back, avoiding the first swipe, and kicked her in the side with a sweeping shin to her side. Sui-Fong took the blow and advanced, shooting her arm forward like a spear. Naruto just barely slapped her arm away, keeping that stinger-like weapon from piercing his chest. His fist clenched in a fist and his white knuckles swept through the air, colliding with Sui-Fong's nose. The woman tumbled once, landing on her feet, skidding to a stop. She did not look at Naruto, her face downward. The blonde was going to advance when his own blood seemed to spit out his arm. Naruto clenched it with his other to stop the bleeding. "I just cut a ligament on your arm there, you won't be using it for some time, and the bleeding won't stop unless heavy pressure is applied with the other arm. Even then, Naruto, it will take some time for it to stop, leaving you with no means of defense." As Sui-Fong explained this, her head slowly rolled up, bright-eyed with a slight smirk on her lips. She was, however, surprised when he began laughing. It began at first as a low chuckle, ha 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 ha, next it rose up from his throat, like a man on the verge of impending madness, ha 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 ha, ah ha 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 ha. There, it exploded out in a rupture of insanity. Bursting from his throat and escaping his malicious fangs as his head threw back, unable to control his own onset of lunacy. His head snapped back down as his laughter died. "You think that's gonna stop me?" Sui-Fong's eyes bugged out of her head at the tone of his voice, it was damn near demonic in its trell of fury and dark bark of words. Even Ranjiku, on the sidelines, reeled a slide at them. Naruto removed his hand from his arm and showed that the bleeding had ceased, the only indication that he had been sliced was the dry blood and ripped cloth of his trench coat. His feet began to move. His boots a slow, insidious way, his arms spread like the wings of bats, ready to encompass her form. "You come here, on orders to kill me and my precious person if I failed this test. You give no condolences to that fact, you attack without giving your opponent a fair shot, and you stand there smirking. Thinking this is over." His voice began to rise as his steps came closer to her, but she could not move. Her legs would not listen. "Move. Attack. Move." She screamed in her mind, but all she could do was stare into those venomous vermilion-slitted orbs, just beneath that scarlet fedora and crimson-tinted goggles. Hadn't they been blue just moments before? No. They held her there in their own rapt attention of rattling insanity, bowing over her with a leer shaking her to her very soul. She could only stare on in horror as his eyes engorged her in its own fury. They were the very chains binding her to her spot, locking her in all enormity of madness made man. He was before her now, his arms spread wide just like the wings of some great beast. Ready to take flight and carry her off. His lips were curled back in a vicious snarling grin, pointed teeth like that of a shark's, ready to devour. Ready to consume. His very presence was bane to her. His very stench of foul maliciousness filled her with utter terror. And he was mere moments away from her, but a breath of air between them. Sui-Fong felt it, her death was not but inches from her face, he was death, he was the executioner. No, no no no, no 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 no. She was going to die. "You think I am a fool?" Next, she saw stars explode behind her vision, pinpricks of light bursting, as she felt her petite form get launched through earth and rock, over and over her form tumbled in a rictus mess of limbs. It only ended a moment later, her body pinned in rock and dirt, a shudder of breath was all she could do to keep herself alive, her whole form aching with maddening pain, everything seemed to be aflame. Her arms were wet with blood, and she was sure several ribs and other bones were broken, left in odd ends of angles that should not be. Her eyes were heavy lids, but she managed to see the very boots of the man who slugged her. Strangely, she felt no fear nor terror this time. Was it his very Reishi that had once before encompassed her in terror, much like Kenpachi? Whatever the case, she did not fear the hand of death that seemed to dangle so close to her gaze, even as this Naruto fellow came closer. Perhaps he would finish her off, a fine end to fight such as he. It would be nice to get away from this excruciating pain, to no longer be. Maybe if she could move, maybe she'd be fighting tooth and nail for life and destroy him, but no. As it were, with not a nerve responding but in pain, she was helpless in what he would do. But, just before she could let that infinite sleep take her, he slammed his stiff fingers through the rock, right by her back. His whole arm seemed to dig in as he pulled her from the stone, jerking her prone form from its imprisonment. Gently, he laid her on the ground, her whole form out for him to examine. 1 2 3 4 5 ribs and a shin bone are broken for sure, more fractures and lacerations all across the body. Naruto spoke softly as he clicked his tongue. One absent finger wiped some blood from her arm. He put it in his mouth and took off one of his gloved hands a moment later, biting his thumb until red began to spill from the skin. "What are you doing?" Her mouth managed to move in a rictus gurgle of pain-filled words. "Open," he told, grabbing her by the chin. She tried to resist at first, but could not with the sheer pain raking her form. Eventually, her lips parted and she was forced to hold onto his thumb. He would have teased that she looked like a little girl then, but decided to be cheeky later. As she drank his blood forced to. He began to speak in a low and somehow caring tone, despite what he had done. "Right now, I have used the ability of my Shikai. It works so that I can keep myself alive by consuming the blood of others whether my Zanpakuto does or nautiking the identity of their Ryuko, copying it as my own, so that even if they die, I can have an extra life. But. If you also take my blood, you too will continue to live, with accelerated healing, so long as I live, otherwise, we both die until I break such a tie." Sui-Fong almost missed his words, but understood what that meant. If she died, he would not, if he died, she would. Therefore damn. Her body seemed to be getting better by the second, and it seemed Naruto sensed this as he finally removed his digit. He stood fully erect on his feet and offered his hand to her. With her ribs still sore, Sui-Fong accepted it, if reluctantly. When she was on her feet, she did notice he was taller, almost by 2 heads. She found herself mesmerized though, his gaze returning to that sapphire blue she had seen before. Her dark eyes looked him up and down, letting her gaze shift all across him until they landed on where she had cut him. "Your clothes atch." She found herself bowl over as pain raked her ribs, she wheezed against it. Naruto supported Sui-Fong up, but it seemed standing was beginning to be too much, so he picked her up and into his arms, her legs over one arm, while the other supported her head. "It will take a day or two for those ribs of yours to fully heal, so take it easy. And if you're wondering, my clothes are a part of me, ripping them can be fixed with Ryatsu, now please, relax." Naruto told, voice gentle like Loden snow, coming to her ears in a lullaby. She felt her eyes begin to shut, but before they could, she pulled out a small phone, calling someone. A few snippets of words were exchanged before she shut the phone. "What was that?" he asked, a laugh almost at his lips. "I told someone to tell Yamamoto that you passed." "Does that mean you have to leave now?" "I can. I am staying to help you train, it is my decision." Although her words seemed to wane a slight, as if her motives were different than that, he let them slide for now. Thought on the matter of her staying. Fine. Naruto conceded as he took Sui-Fong and Ranjiku back to his house, an extra mouth to feed, but he didn't mind, at least he still had Ranjiku by his side. And a red-haired fox woman. And now a stinging petite woman. How many girls are going to keep coming? Naruto wondered. It had been but a few days since the test Naruto had taken, a few simple days on getting to know his and Ranjiku's new house guest. Were those the right words? Well, whatever it was, you called someone after they were gonna kill you if you failed a test and now was almost forcing themselves in your home. Now, don't get Naruto wrong, he did not mind the extra person, nor the fact she packed lighter relief when compared to what Ranjiku would carry, and he actually found her mannerisms quite amusing. She found that most everything must be serious, even setting the table for breakfast in an orderly way. Though, in Naruto's mind, she was just a bit salty. It were early morning and he had woken up, and so he decided to sit about and get his thoughts in order. Though, that was easy to say, it was hard to do, for instance, Sui-Fong and her sudden stay, or Kyuubi and what she and he did. He avoided that last thought however, not wanting to awaken Ranjiku or Sui-Fong, who was in a side room sound asleep, and decided to think on the latter, knowing he'd end up cursing greatly at himself for cheating. Strange thing about Sui-Fong, if he would misplay something, she would scold him and immediately put it back, making whatever it was face the way it was supposed to, brand and all. Well, Sui-Fong was not all that bad, having someone actually clean messes instead of make them was good, for all in the home actually. He didn't have to bear Ranjiku's lazy response to why she didn't clean, and he himself wouldn't have to clean as much. As for the second captain, it was like moving meditation, meticulous yet structured, and it seemed to calm her, despite the woman's initial response to the mess. Kinda like those sand rock gardens with the rakes, making lines around them and all, but with cleaning. Naruto thought it was kinda cute too, the way she was, small and easy to look down at, not eye to eye. Ah. What am I thinking? I have enough to deal with. Between Ranjiku and Kyuubi trying to pull me somewhere. I do not need another. Ah, he didn't mean to bring this on you, Naruto, sorry, I guess I will leave you be. But the groan, the whiskered blonde pinched the bridge of his nose. Of course, he forgot, Kyuubi had been listening to his thoughts within the seal, and now she's using his mind to communicate. It wasn't that bad, besides the fact that she kept asking for him to come inside the seal for things he was not willing to repeat. When he denied her, he could swear he felt her turn about, making a hump sound before saying she didn't want to be around him anyway. Strange one, that Kyuubi. But, look at what he got doing that the last time. Naruto wished Kyuubi hadn't done that, it just made things more complicated. If when the Nine Tails get out and she sticks around, which he knew she would, she and Ranjiku might duke it out, and he did not want to be in the middle of that. Plus, now listen here, he honestly was beginning to love the orange-haired lass, but he also honestly did not think she'd last long against someone with the power of flattening mountains with ease. Kyuubi, you know me and Ranjiku. I don't mind. She snapped a reply. Although Naruto tried to reason with her, Kyuubi just dropped something he'd rather not think about. What? He questioned, knowing already what she was talking about. When I get out, I don't mind sharing is caring, her voice dropped and he had to pinch his nose again, trying to keep his mind steeled from the thoughts that were beginning to swarm. He held his breath for a moment, then let it out, trying to calm himself. For the love of Kyuubi, if I were any other man I'd jump on that idea, but this is the real world, women don't simply just share a guy. They try to either kill each other, the guy, or both. I really don't know how I am gonna explain what we did to Ranjiku when. He paused, looked up at a clock in the kitchen, then cursed. Shit, I have to get to the academy soon. Naruto quickly formed his hand seals, making a few clones. It was strange, using both those energies, but he figured it didn't matter, so long as he could. Naruto set about, telling his clones all that they were to do. One began making breakfast and another began cleaning. The real Naruto set himself up with a piece of paper and pen, writing down what was going on. But that, he taped it to the fridge for the two women of the house to see when they woke and began making his way to the academy. A few minutes passed quietly in the apartment home of the Jinchuriki, and Sui-Fong had finally decided to get up from slumber. She always got up early and fixed herself something to eat, and today was no exception. Her mind was a bit clouded from sleep however, so when she half walked half stumbled into the living room and open kitchen, she about pinched herself. So, he was not lying about the clones. She found herself moving towards them with a bit of hesitance. Hey, soy. One clone acknowledged with a grin. What did you? Hey, I made some breakfast for you and Ranjiku, eat. Another told, proffering her ramen. Sui-Fong took a moment to let her mind catch up, a bit flustered with the attention. She thanked the clone and began eating. Is that a blush? Sui-Fong stopped eating after that, her eyes finding the clone who spoke. It was the one who called her soy. She clenched her fist and socked the clone across the face, making it poof away in a plume of smoke. Satisfied that she could eat in relative peace, Sui-Fong began to eat again, sitting down on the couch. Naruto was flash-stepping towards the academy when the memories of his clone came rushing back. So she does not like being called soy, got to remember that. He told himself, feeling a slight grin come up the side of his face. The whiskered blonde made his way to the building moments later, making his way towards the specified room. He found Sasuke and Sakura there, the latter having a bright blush on her face, the former trying to hide his in the high collar of his shirt. Naruto stepped up towards him and saw that he was now a good head taller than him and decided to tease him on two fronts. So, shorty got a girlfriend. Shut it, dope. Sasuke snapped back, if a little shy with his words. Sakura said nothing, hands behind her back, still smiling. Creepy, but okay. With that, they made their way towards the stairs just down the hall, making their way up. Some strange things waited them on top, a turtle being one of them, and a boy with the largest eyebrows Naruto had ever seen. He ignored them and continued up, but stopped when Sasuke seemed to be challenged by the green spandex bushy-browed kid. Oh, what am I gonna do with you? Naruto quickly said before shouting back that he would be waiting for them upstairs. He made his way up and through a pair of doors, finding himself in a room full of shinobi. Not just any shinobi, but genin, from all over the world he could see by their headband. For some reason they all just stared at him, like he was a phantom, a wraith just waiting to sweep down and devour them, to go and reap them all. Fear. My, they must be weak, he hadn't even grinned yet or let any Reishi out, or if he had it was not by purpose. Naruto decided he'd just have a sit at one of the tables, prop his feet up, relax. He found a seat in the middle of the room of the tables doing just that. He noticed everyone still staring at him and he laughed a little, making all present flinch beneath the harsh sound. Tipping his hat over his tinted goggles, Naruto finally let out a grin. Are you also afraid that my standing here affects you? If so, none of you should be here. As he said this, one of the genin shouted out at him. Then why are you here? You don't even have a headband. Lost it? So? Naruto shook his head a slight and decided to shut their mouth. His body went up in a rigor mortis effect, his whole body stiff as he raised from his seat, a wide arc when he stood on the table, as if possessed by a demon. Try me, I dare you, I double dog dare you mother. Naruto stopped himself, finally recognizing the voice. Kiba, you dirty bastard. He shouted, a smile on his face, stepping on the air for a moment before hopping down to extend a hand. Do I know you? The boy asked as Akamaru yipped at him. Naruto pulled his tinted goggles up a slight with his fedora. Naruto. Recognition flashed in his eyes at last, when did you get so tall? Oh, you know, drank my milk, exercise daily, use reishi a lot. Reiwa. Nothing, just make sure these basic bitches keep quiet, I got nappin' to do. And with that, Naruto headed back to his seat, already snoring away, leaving Kiba to deal with over 100 angry glares. A few minutes passed, Sasuke came back with bruises, but a sakura on his shoulder, which also became an Ino Yamanaka. They began to bike her and Naruto was awakened from his slumber. He sat up straight and yelled over to Kiba. Boy, what did I tell you about the bitches? That's not my job. Kiba complained back. It is now. Naruto snapped back. Well, why don't you deal with it then if it's so concerning? Kiba bellowed in return. Okay. Naruto's voice suddenly dropped and all around, it seemed like pressure was raining on all who was in the room. Everyone had to take a knee, feeling fear begin to boil up in them. He took steps on the air once more, going over all their heads and towards the front of the room with the chalkboard. Now, if you would all be quiet, I have a lesson for you. Number 1, he held up his fingers for them all to see, do not, under any circumstances, disturb my sleep. Here he held up 2 more. Now for 2 and 3, do not interrupt me, or I will personally slash Sudasarasa on all of you. And for the 3rd, if you by chance want revenge for this humiliation, just remember that if you choose to harm those close to me, here, he paused, his eyes flashing scarlet slits, I will devour you. With that, the pressure ended, leaving all in a desperate need to puke. Terror steamed in them so much that when he passed by, they gave in a good few feet of space. He sat back down, but no one moved. Sit. He commanded. Just as he said this, the proctor, Ibiki, would say that he had never seen kids get to their seats as fast as these did. The black-cloaked man silently thanked the Naruto guy though, because his work had already been cut out for him. Putting such fear into fellow genins, coupled with a strenuous test he was going to put them through, there was going to be scarcity among chunins this year, that's for sure. His voice rose above the silence, telling them the rules of the test. When he was finished, paper was passed about and everyone was given a pencil to use. It took a bit for them to figure it out, but when they did, Naruto had to grin. The test that encouraged cheating. Backwards thinking if this was regular school, but then again, it wasn't. He noticed several of the chunins lined against the walls began to dot down and reduce points, or doodling. They knew the genin were watching, so by making them anxious, they were more likely to act desperate, which reduced their points until they were kicked out. Naruto wanted to laugh, but knew he'd be kicked out too, so, instead, he went for a low chuckle. Beside him, Hinata was blushing. She was by Naruto, of course, and couldn't help it. He suddenly glanced at her and gave a slight nod in recognition. Her face lit up some more, but he stared on at in the distance, as if his mind were elsewhere. He suddenly picked up his pencil and wrote down something. The cake is a lie. Blinking, Hinata's lavender gaze fixed itself back up to Naruto, who began tapping the test with the eraser end of his pencil. It took the Byakugan user a moment to recognize what he was saying. The test wasn't an actual test, it was merely a part of the actual test. They were supposed to gather information without being caught, but that wasn't the whole of it. And, if she were right, if they had to wait 45 minutes for the first question to be given in the first place, then that only confirmed it. Time went by, and many genin teams were kicked out, leaving their numbers to dwindle more and more, making others nervous, slip up, and get kicked out too. So, when the mark of 45 minutes lapsed, Ibiki began to speak once more. He told everyone that was left that if they failed this question, they would no longer be able to take the chunin test again, but if they wanted to, they could leave and try again next year. All were shocked except Naruto, who yawned, much to the interrogator's ire. A few more dropped out, and Ibiki smirked. Is that all? Any more? You will be genin forever if you fail, your pay will remain the same, and you won't be able to exceed. He took a look around once more, then smiled. And I guess, you all pass. Naruto felt their expressions change into that of relief and confusion. But, the proctor congratulated them and said that the next proctor would be here shortly. Glass bowed and exploded as a large banner flew out over the front of the classroom, covering Ibiki. Another shape came flying through, standing on the desk for all to see her grandiose entrance of flash and bang. My name is Anko Mitarashi. I will be your next proctor. She shouted to the genins, a grin plastered over her face. Hey. Naruto shouted, a bigger grin on his face. She looked at him for a moment, a raised brow, but grinned once more, trying to beat him with her own boisterousness. Where are we going next? He asked. Forest of Death's entrance. She told, her grin failing even as his grew. Neat, beat you there. He told, his body disappearing from view. It took a moment for Anko to catch up with what was said, her mind lagging on his words. When they finally clicked, her expression was between slight anger, but interest. Before she slipped away in a swirl of leaves, she said. Oh, it is on. Naruto was speeding towards the entrance to the Forest of Death, a bit excited. This woman was going to try and race him there, he knew that. She was much like him, boisterous, but not stupid. He could tell she was competitive, a woman that maybe he'd battle sometime. Brat. Man, he really needed to get her number. Anko Mitarashi was behind him as they bound over the building tops, getting ever closer to the tree line. She was gaining on him, and she was grinning wide, that much he could see. She had it in her mind that she was going to win. And he had to admit, she might, it was neck and neck. How was she able to keep up when he was using Shunpo? Maybe Anko had her own version, or maybe she was just that quick. But, he was quicker. Naruto gave her a glance, a grin, and gave the peace sign. All she heard next was a shoo, and he was gone. The woman's eyes widened and she tripped, tumbling into the air. Luckily, she was out of the way of the village, but unluckily, she was rapidly falling into the earth. She covered her head and prepared for the pain. Huh? It took her a moment to realize it, but she was not embedded in the ground. Nor did she feel pain. Her eyes opened, and all she saw was blank darkness. Was it so that she was in purgatory already? Had the fall killed her, and now God was deciding on whether or not to send her up or down? It felt like it, this place of sticky tar, without shape or form. Light was peeling before her vision, and she was essentially spat out. Anko rolled rapidly for a few moments before she tried to correct herself, jumping up, only to hit her back against a tree. Aw. She groaned, falling flat on her face. Moments later, she stood, a half grin on her face. You think you're funny, don't you? She found Naruto and threw a kunai at him, intending to cut his cheek, but after so many turns and tumbles, her aim was off. With being so preoccupied with saving Anko, Naruto could do nothing as the kunai slammed right into his face, blood spurting out as his whole body crumpled to the ground, twitching a slight. There was a great silence echoing across, and Anko's mind finally registered what she had done. Shit. She cursed, almost flying over to his side. The wound was fatal, she saw, and her mind raced to try to find a way to fix her mistake. Why did she have to kill this interesting genin? He was kinda cute until he took a kunai to the face. Damn, every time she tried to just joke around, she ended up doing this. Well, not specifically this, but that was besides the point. Anko was gonna call in someone when his hand suddenly leapt to life. Her heart jumped from her chest, and she was frozen in fear. That hand was without eyes to help search, and it began to flail out. It calmed when it found Anko's hand on its owner's chest, however. She watched as it slowly began to creep up her arm and to her shoulder. Ah! She screamed a bit, the hand squeezing her chest. She smacked Naruto's face by instinct, sending the hand away. Somehow, with a kunai in his skull, Naruto was able to speak. Oh, thank you, when this kunai came through my brain, it jumbled up my sense of direction. My eyes also have blood over them, so it doesn't help, even with the goggles. He told, as if speaking about the general weather. Anko was not sure to be grossed out, or morbidly, yet highly, intrigued. She watched his hand grab that of the kunai's handle, and yank it out without a single flinch. Ah, much better, you would think a wooden splinter is bad, but metal ones are worse. He told, still sounding way too calm for what happened to him. Hey, by chance, could you pop those water balloons? I kinda need them to get the blood out of my eyes. But I don't have water balloons. Her voice was numb. Then what did I? Oh, haha, sorry, I have a canteen. Her laugh was nervous as a blush began spreading across her cheeks. But canteens aren't soft. Shhhhhh. She interrupted, pouring water all over his face, waterlogging him as she cleaned his eyes of blood, removing the tinted goggles that helped little, a bit surprised to find the wound closed already if at all closed in the first place. Anko felt pretty bad, you know, killing someone who continued to be chill about it kind of bad. Though, had she killed him? Or was he using some kind of bloodline? No gain jutsu, she was sure, nor was it a ninjutsu. Nothing could have saved him from a direct blow to the brain like that, the damn kunai was logged to the handle in his skull. So how had he survived? She was finished cleaning him and gave back his goggles. Thanks Anko, you can get off me now. The snake user looked down and her eyes widened to some extent. Her chest was pressed into his, and so much so that her breasts were being pushed up. When had she done that? Bah. She didn't care, she was actually thinking about teasing the blonde, in fact. Don't you like girls, Naruto-kun, she asked, her voice dropping. But the sigh, Naruto said. First of all I already have to deal with two, and one is pushing herself on me already. Second of all, even if I wanted to do that with you, which I wouldn't mind, the others are already here. She jumped up faster than he had ever seen anyone move, her feet moving her before the rest of the group. She looked back on him with a confident face. What are you doing on the ground, maggot? Get in line. He raised a brow to her and used shunpo, getting right behind her. He knew her angle, she wanted to show she was the top dog, keep the runts in line. She knew he was one of the stronger genin, and their little race proved that, so by making him follow directions, the rest would do the same. Now, he could help her, you know, extend the olive branch and all, but he was too damn cheeky. Oh, no Anko, you're the one who needs to get in line. He whispered loud enough for them to hear, right in her ear. She tried to turn away from him, but his white-gloved hands held her sides, holding her still. Are you blushing? He asked, seeing the red on her cheeks. That I in line, her voice staggered. You know, it's a bit complicated, but because you killed me once, I ended up using a life of someone else's Ryuko I copied. I only have 2 left, and the one I don't want to waste is healing well because of me, so, you won't mind if I take your blood. All I have to do is sink in my teeth, sip out the inside it, you won't mind, will you? He asked, leaning into her neck, a beepy grin on his face. Don't. She tried to resist. I promise it won't hurt, he leaned back up to her ear, nibbling on it a slight, just a little nip. His mouth opened, those razors grazing her skin, forcing a gasp come from the woman. Oh well, he said, standing up straight, guess you don't want to help any, I have to take a test anyway. Naruto told, his beepy grin back on his face as he walked up beside his team, standing behind them. What? Come on Anko, we are just genin, we're gonna have to take this test of yours, so get on with it. The Mitarashi felt 2 things rise up in her then. On one hand, she wanted to smack that grin off his face, on the other, she wanted to take him into her home and not ever let him out. But, ultimately, the stares of the many forced her to shake herself from what he had done. Back at Naruto's apartment, Ranjiku was just now waking up from her sleep. She grumbled a bit as she made her way to the kitchen, her hair all frizzed and wild. Sui-Fong was on the couch, reading calmly. Ranjiku was going to tell her good morning, but soon got an idea. Sneaking as best she could behind the captain, the orange-haired lass threw her arms over her neck, pushing her face between Sui-Fong's shoulder and neck. Ah. The woman tried to leap away, surprised that the former lieutenant got under her radar. Hey Sui-Fong, what you readin'? She asked, rubbing her face against the others. That is none of your business. Ranjiku raised a brow, swiping the book without thought. The captain tried to get it back from her, but her reach failed. Sui-Fong's cheeks began to burn bright red as Ranjiku read the title. Icha Paradise. What is this? She asked, looking back down at the shorter woman. She saw Sui-Fong grip the cushion of the couch a bit too hard, nearly tearing it as her face turned ever redder. I saw it at the market, it was quite popular, many people tried to buy it, and… What's it about? Ranjiku cut the stuttering woman off and began to skim through. Soon, her face began to flush crimson too, but instead of worry, a sly grin spread itself across her face. Oh Sui-Fong didn't know you were a pervert. Ranjiku threw the book back at the captain and leapt just as she did. Completely caught off guard, Sui-Fong let the book hit her and instead braced herself as Ranjiku's larger form came over her petite one. They rolled off the couch and tumbled across the floor, Ranjiku trying to grapple the captain, her grin still on her face. Sui-Fong had Ranjiku's arm trapped between her legs, her arms holding the others down. Ranjiku rolled into it, breaking the hold, shooting one leg over and the other under Sui-Fong's neck, holding one of the captain's legs by the crook of her elbow. Sui-Fong tried to escape, but found struggling only cost her wasted air. What are you doing, fool? She managed to growl out at the curvaceous woman. Oh Sui-Fong, if I knew you were a pervert, I would have done this long ago, you do know a strict woman can be fun too, right? Ranjiku told, her grin wide and her eyes searching for something. It is not like that. Oh, then why were you on chapter 4? You're not fooling me. The former lieutenant brought her free hand over the captain's stomach, fingertips lining out the center, before climbing the slim legs Sui-Fong had. She couldn't help the moan that escaped as Ranjiku continued. See, you're like me. Sui-Fong bit her lip, trying to keep herself from sighing. How long ago was it since she had ever done something like that? She honestly couldn't remember, too enamored in her duties to concern herself. But that didn't mean she wanted those. Feelings to be solved like this, with another woman no less. She tried to think of a way out, but could not, her mind beginning to haze over as heat began to spread from her stomach, going out to her chest and legs, reaching her head. But something finally came to mind. I thought you and Naruto were, she tried to argue, but was interrupted. In a way of speaking, yes, we are together in more ways than one, but I don't think he'll mind if he finds us in certain positions. Ranjiku told, bringing her digits over and down to the inside of the slim thighs of Sui-Fong. No. You are no normal pervert. You're a super pervert. It was at that moment, far away, that an older man with white spiky hair and red clothes sneezed. He looked about and shouted out in a great voice, no. Someone is trying to take my title. Back with Naruto and his team, they were currently in the forest of death, hopping tree to tree. It would appear that they would have to get to the center of this place, a tower was erected there. Not only that, but they had to find another scroll, a heaven scroll, they had an earth scroll, and anyone with an heaven scroll needed to get an earth scroll. Something tells me, we are gonna be screwed if we stop, but Sasuke and Sakura cannot keep speeding towards the center and fight as well. So, the question is there a secure spot we can find for a base? But with so many prying eyes, oh, wait, I know what to do. Naruto's face suddenly lit up like no other, his head snapping between his two teammates. Is it possible that you two can keep from getting into trouble for 10 minutes? I have a plan to keep us safe and get rest during the night. Sasuke looked back, thinking on it. Naruto was already very powerful, which pissed him off a bit, but he knew that going along with his plan and it succeeding would mean they could get rest and stay at the ready. Although he didn't know what the young man was up to, he nodded. Sakura did the same. Good, see ya in a bit. And with that, Naruto dissipated in a flash step. Mere moments later, the howls and cries of great beasts were heard throughout the whole of the forest, and even the wails of humans every so often became a breath of dread for them all. Sasuke felt a chill run up his spine, actually feeling sorry for anyone who dared get in the blonde's path as he did. Something. He did not rightly know what the blonde was doing or why, but whatever it was frightening. It mattered not in the end, though, so long as it helped the team. 10 minutes passed, and somehow, he found them again, bounding next to them from tree to tree. All over the Jinchuriki there was blood, his whole clothes scratched up, blood at the corner of his lips. Both Sasuke and Sakura doubted it was his. Did you get a scroll? Sasuke found himself say, unable to ask what the former had committed. The eyes behind the tinted goggles flashed an angry crimson, a vibe of frustration coming over him. He tilted his head back between leaps, glaring back at the Uchiha. Only another earth scroll, I left it there, with however they were. Sakura was the one to flinch at the harsh words, so uncaring even for those who provoked the young lad. No one dared speak, respecting that the blonde was frustrated for doing whatever amount of work he did, it seemed they could not finish the test too swiftly. They knew he was now very strong, and for whatever effort was done to help them, must have left him a bitter. Something didn't sit well, it seemed. Hey, look, sorry for snapping at you. Naruto apologized, throwing a softer glance back at the two. It may be hard to understand, but with the powers given to me, I acquired abilities you wouldn't believe. This Zanpakuto on my back is only one of them. The other involves copying the composition of someone's spiritual particles. Ryuko if you will, and it allows me to regenerate even if I die. It's just a bit difficult to manage, so it leaves me irritable. Sasuke and Sakura were a bit taken back by that. Naruto usually did not apologize, especially now that people were hard-pressed to threaten him to do so. But he willingly accepted his fault, apologizing for getting mad at nothing. It was a human moment, at least for the two behind him. Though, the moment was gone when, out of nowhere, came one of the largest snakes they had yet to see. Jesus Moth AF. And it went straight for Naruto, swallowing the poor sod whole. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.